We are here with Yvette Ackerman. You go by Eve?
Most of the time.
Nice to call you Eve. Could you give us your full name and age and date of birth, please?
Yvette Michelle Boone Ackerman. I'm 45, and I was born May 30th, 1962.
Great. And I forgot to mention that it's December 19th, 2007. We're at Ackerman Farms near Morton in Tazewell County, Illinois. And can you tell us about your birthplace and your immediate family, mother, father, and your siblings, if you have any siblings?
Sure. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama. My mother and father are Don and Marie Boone. Yes, Donnie and Marie. And I have, and they're both still alive, both still married to each other. I have a brother, Lee. He's Donald Lee Boone Jr., and he's a year younger than I am. And he lives in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. Where did you grow up?
Kind of all over. My dad was into computers and was a master programmer in the very beginning and in the 60s and all. And so we moved a lot. So we spent a few years in Alabama, and then we lived close to an Army base in Texas while he worked with some programming for the government. And then we went to Chicago for several years. And then we moved downstate to Morton, where I met my husband in high school. And then we went to Georgia, where I lived for about 14 years. And then I moved back up here in, I think, 1994.
So how long did you live in Morton the first time you were here?
Only about 3.5 years. And then we transferred down to Atlanta, Georgia.
So that's where you met John.
Mm-hmm.
And then you moved back here and then got
Right.
married, right?
I had been married once before in Atlanta and was divorced, and I decided that I wanted to raise my kids back in the Midwest. I found Atlanta, no offense to Atlanta, but I found it a little anonymous, if you will. It's hard to get to know your neighbors, and going to the grocery store requires a good hour of your time, mostly in traffic, and I just didn't want that anymore. So decided to come back here.
Now, Ackerman Farms is just about a mile east of Morton, is that
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're real close to town. Can you kind of describe the town of Morton for us?
Well, I find Midwesterners to be friendly, but in a cautious sort of way. And but I knew that once you were a friend, it was a friendship for life. And I wanted my kids to have that. And when I moved back to this area, there were several places I was looking at, but the Morton School District had the best reputation. And both of my kids are bright, of course. And I wanted them to be in the school district and get the benefit of that education, because I had gone through high school in Morton and I knew really what it was going to be all about. And I wanted them to, my goal was for my kids to not grow up moving all over the place. And so I wanted them to settle someplace where they would be known and where they would know other people.
So when you moved back to Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
You and John got married and moved into the house. When did that happen?
We got married about 9 months, I guess, after I moved back, and we actually lived in a third-floor apartment with soon-to-be 3 kids, and circumstances changed here on the farm with John's mom having a stroke and having to be hospitalized and then going into a nursing home facility, and his dad had never really, lately been on his own and cooked for himself or did his own laundry or really anything like that. And we knew it was time. And we talked it over with him, and he was agreeable. I think mostly because he was hungry. And then, we moved in, and it was, it was not easy for anybody, and certainly not for Papa, because it had just been him and Margaret for several years, and they had their own way of doing things. And here comes this loud bunch of people that move in with him and start beating up his house and tearing things down and cooking meals that he didn't normally eat. And it was an adjustment for him and for everybody.
So did he live with you guys here in the house for a time?
We did for several years. Yeah, we did. A few years.
So we've talked to John about the evolution of the farm,
Right.
starting out as corn and beef cattle operation, and it's bloomed into something totally different at this point. Could you kind of summarize the evolution of the farm from your perspective? Some of the things that have been developed, like the shop,
Right.
your own.
It's been a real switch, because when we moved here, I was still working outside of the house, more in a human relations kind of office suit setting, and it was really different. Moving out here, I'd never been on a cattle farm before, so getting up at 3 in the morning because fence was broken and cattle were getting on the highway, and you're 3 months pregnant and holding a flashlight. That was a real switch for me. That changed a lot. I mean, a lot of things were just different. But you adapt, and of course things just changed. We had to consider how we were going to be able to stay on the farm, and things also changed when we had our 4th child, because he was high risk pregnancy, bed rest, and then when he was born he had health issues, and that kind of decided the fact that I would be home, at least for those first few years. And by that time we had 4 children, so I was needed here. But it's hard to go away from a salary and benefits to self-insured and no paycheck, steady paycheck coming in, so we had to come up with something else to do. So
what was one of the first things you guys tried?
Well, I think John probably told you the story about how we sort of just kind of fell into growing pumpkins, and it just changed, kind of morphed from me taking our youngest son Sam out on hay racks with me to load pumpkins by hand, to and having just an honor system bucket sitting out there for people who wanted to buy their pumpkins, to what it is now. And we kind of listened to what our customers wanted. When they showed up the first year and they liked the different varieties of pumpkins, well, someone would ask for something even different. And then they started asking for chrysanthemums. And then they said how neat it would be if we had apples. And we kept chasing people out of the old hog building. And finally it occurred to us that maybe we should give them something to go in and see instead of shooing them out all the time. So we raised the building up, and I have kind of a background a little bit in retail and an interest in home decor, and just kind of morphed from there.
John's already told us how many wheelbarrows of
It was an aromatic summer.
Let's skip that part. But the building was raised and it's on blocks now, and it's got a heated floor. And is it open year round, or is there a particular
No, it's still a basic barn building. So while we have added things over the years, we knew ahead of time it was going to be cold, because sometimes our first frost is early October, late September. So John went ahead and put the radiant floor heat in. Well, the first year we were open, we decided to carry some Christmas items, but we also froze. So the next year we blew insulation into the sides, and we blew insulation against the tin roof so that all our heat wouldn't just wick through the roof. And just kind of went from there. But no matter what you do, that building is not going to be warm in January. Nobody's going to want to come out in January.
And that's a little bit of sunlight in a few spots.
Yeah.
True. Now, can you kind of summarize the variety of things that you have in the shop out there?
Well, our tagline is it's an eclectic assortment of gifts and home decor. We don't want our customers to find the same old that they're going to find somewhere else. We like to carry Illinois products if we can, if not Midwestern products. We like to feature different cooks and artists in our region that are really very good. And I'm really picky about that, because my background when I lived in Georgia was all food. Catering and restaurant management and customer service and all of that. And I worked with some great cooks and some great chefs over the years, and so I was pretty picky about the foods that we carried. And I ran into some great people that they're passionate about what they do, and that's always encouraging to have somebody who's that excited about their products, because that translates to us and we can be excited about their products too. So we have quite a following on a lot of things now.
And I think the shop here came before the shop in town. Can you tell
Right.
us about the development of the shop in town?
Well, it's kind of like all farmers. Come August, you're dirt poor. Cash has run out. We wanted to find something that would give us a little bit, not a lot, but at least a little bit of cash flow coming in throughout the year. And so it just kind of fell into our laps. There had been this building that I had admired for a few years and thought it was really a cute place, and all of a sudden it became available. And like every other decision we've made, it's been by the seat of our pants. We just did it. And it was fine. It was a good idea. It was a small boutique. It was a nice fit for about a year. And then we started having growing pains. Customers would like us to carry this line, and certain lines just kind of develop. Each location definitely has its own personality, and lots of times it has its own clientele. And you kind of have to follow what your customers are telling you. And when we had an offer to move to our second downtown location this past July, I was actually the one dragging her feet because I liked my little boutique, but I knew we needed more space. And I thought the timing was all wrong because it was July and we're going to open at the shop here in August, but it's really worked out well. It's 2.5 times bigger than the shop we had before, the little boutique, and it's roughly the same size as what we have here. And the clientele's completely different.
And the merchandise you have in the two different shops, is there any overlap at all? Or is it
There's a little bit of overlap, and that was another reason why we opened downtown, because we do carry specialty foods and specialty crafts and items that you can't find anywhere else. And our customers, we had been open here for 4 years, and they're like, but you close in December, and I have to wait until August to get what I need. And so we decided to give them an opportunity to get the items that they wanted. And we didn't think we'd need that much space to do that. So that changed.
Now, do you have to do traveling to buy the stock at the store downtown?
Mm-hmm. I've done Atlanta and I've done the Chicago shows. Atlanta is convenient because I have friends and family down there, but it's also a really big show and overwhelming. Chicago, I think I can do in my sleep now. But they come in January, which is traditionally a downtime for retail. So everybody says, oh, you get to rest in January. And say, no, that's when taxes are due. That's when you go to your gift shows. That's when you have to do a lot of buying and things like that. And then we also do auctions and estate sales because we mix our products. They know that if they want to buy a piece of furniture, which we didn't anticipate in the beginning, we'd have one-of-a-kind pieces that we picked up just for display. Well, people wanted to buy them. So that's kind of morphed into its own thing. But our customers know that often what they see is it. I mean, that's one of a kind, and if they want it, they better get it then because it'll be gone. So we do a lot of estate sales, a lot of auctions, and John's always pulling over to the side of the road so I can go look at something that I've just seen. Happens all the time.
Could you kind of summarize some things that you provide for store downtown that you offer?
Well, it's a diverse mix of furniture, that's for sure. It kind of morphed into different, almost like baby boutique kind of items. I just took on a new vendor. She is a bow maker. She makes hair bows for little girls, all because she didn't like what was out there when she had her daughters. So she decided to start making them herself. And it just kind of grew from that. And we carry jewelry, which didn't really go over so well here, but when we took it downtown, we couldn't keep it stocked enough. Some of it is local glass blowers and different artists that we find at maybe some of the juried art shows. If I really like their products, I try and get to know them and see if they're willing to wholesale to me. I don't like to do consignment on anything at all. There's only one person I'm willing to do that with, and he's a local photographer here in the area who does beautiful landscapes and florals. It's a real diverse mix. You may not find the same thing when you walk in a month later.
So you're responsible for both the shop here at the farm and the one downtown. How many employees do you have at any given time?
Well, at the peak of our season, we have about 19. And then in our downtime, our slower season, which is roughly January to August, we run anywhere from 3 to 5. And some of them are our own kids. You know, as they get older, they come on as payroll versus slaves.
I assume they appreciate that.
They seem to.
Now, what kind of people work in your shops? Are there high school students, college students?
Our seasonal workers tend to be, during the day, our moms, because they want to work while their kids are in school and then be available for them before school and after school, which works out fairly well. Then after school, it tends to be high schoolers. And I was explaining before, some of our kids are now second-generation kids, because this is, I think, our 9th year now. So we've gone through the brothers and sisters, and, you know, we're moving on to the next group of kids. And it's funny, because some of them stay with us throughout high school. And I've got one working for me downtown who's was in high school, and now she's in college, and she's still with me. And they have a habit of, you know, getting a real job and going away. But, you know, for the meantime, it's a pretty good mix. The only problem is if all of our kids go to the same high school, then they all want the same prom off or the same homecoming dance, or they may all have the same vacation time and may all need to be gone. And the same with our moms. If they're all from the same school district, same thing. If their kids have a day off, then they all want to be off with their kids. That can be a little bit tricky.
So you're on top of it all the time with the staff.
I hate doing the schedule, yeah. It's a juggling act sometimes. But, you know, I have really good people who've been with us for years, and that's helpful. That's real helpful.
We talked to John a little bit about gender roles on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider yourself a farm wife or a farm person, or do you consider yourself more of a retail person based on the farm?
Wow. Well, I don't get out there and pick pumpkins like I used to. That slip disc, it's coming in handy now. It depends. It just depends. Right now I feel like I've been pulled away from the home farm probably more than I would like to, because that was my goal, was to be here. But it's kind of morphed into other things. And I'm not sure that I would ever be satisfied to just work here, if that makes sense. Not putting homemakers down at all, but I think if I didn't have some kind of creative outlet in some way, I wouldn't be very happy.
I got the impression from talking to John that this is an important way that you guys have come up with a strategy for maintaining the family farm.
Right.
The operation has just continued to diversify through the years. Is that the way you see it?
Absolutely. I mean, we had to diversify or we would lose it. I mean, it just wouldn't happen. And doesn't mean there aren't still farm loans that scare us to death. And, you know, it doesn't mean that. It just means we had to come up with some other way to. And then it also doesn't mean that our children are going to choose to do this. You know, our two oldest have no, I mean, they help, and they're just as good to slide right in and pick up the slack when we need them to, but their interests are really elsewhere. And our youngest two, well, they're only 10 and 12, so who knows? But we'd like to at least give them that option, that when the time comes, if they want to, it's available to them. And it wasn't just sold off because we couldn't keep it anymore. We couldn't make it viable.
Now, if you look at the history of farming, say in the last 30 or 40 years, there's been tremendous changes. How do you feel about the changes that have affected families during that time, right up through the present day?
Well, I don't know if I'm really good enough to speak on that, because I've only been doing this really here for 14 years. So I don't know that I have a great enough background, because I only spent summers on my grandparents' farm, and I know how hard that was for them to scrape a living. And they lived very, very simply, much simpler than what we live here, and I know much simpler than what John's family lived 30, 40 years ago. I think it's morphed into an a big business versus the small farms. And a lot of it is the kids on the farms growing up have so many more options, so many more opportunities available to them. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. It's just different. You know, it's not like you're going to be a millionaire farming unless you're farming the mega acres. And that seems to be the mindset. You know, everybody wants to have, you know, the vacation home somewhere else and the grand lifestyle. Well, you're not going to get that if you farm.
Yeah, but looking at the diversity of this farm and all the operations you have, I wonder how you manage to keep up and keep your sanity.
I don't. Don't. I'm really pleased that there are things like laptops and accounting programs. Doesn't mean I like them. Doesn't mean I'm very good at it. But you know, we've had to make adjustments. It doesn't mean we're going to have a home cooked meal every night. It doesn't mean that. You know, we've had to make adjustments for things. John has to do things now that he probably wasn't doing 10 years ago with the kids because I'm not always here anymore. Not that I was always here 10 years ago. I was usually working somewhere else. But we have to work together to get it done. And if that means I have to put on jeans and work boots and go pick pumpkins, then I have to do that. And if he has to learn how to get behind the counter and ring somebody up, then we all have to wear, it's up to him and I to pretty much wear all of the hats. And if something, that's my biggest worry, if something happens to one of us, I worry that the farm won't survive.
So that's one of the biggest challenges here is to maintain the family farm.
Absolutely. If one of us goes down, my fear is everything goes down.
Just looking to the future,
Mm-hmm.
what changes do you think you might see in farming, say, in the next 10 to 20 years?
In farming?
Yeah.
Well, I'm confident that the trend is, at least right now, seeming to swing back to buy local. And there's so many health benefits that have been out in the news in the last year or two about how much more beneficial it is to you, health-wise, to eat local produce and buy from your local area and your local farmer, and you don't have to age your food so much before you get it. I see that. I understand the global economy. I understand the need to be a global community, but I also understand community responsibility, if you will. So I'm encouraged by the atmosphere of community responsibility and helping your local farmer or artisan or whoever. And that's been huge for us because we have tremendous support from our local communities. And it's not just Morton. And the longer we're here, the more it seems to spider out, if you will. We have people who are bringing their kids and they want to come back every year because it's a tradition. And they recognize that it's our tradition here too. So I'm encouraged by that.
One other thing, John mentioned that you have a green thumb. Can you tell us a little bit about your gardening?
I don't have a green thumb. No, I don't know. My grandmother could stick anything in the ground and it would grow. And I like to garden. I don't necessarily have the time that I'd like to spend to garden, but I like to garden. And I don't know. My mom says I get it from her mother, because I didn't get it from my mom. So, I don't know.
What all's in your garden?
Just depends. Mostly it's just tomatoes and green peppers, and we try different things. I really like to have fresh cut flowers around. So, and I'm especially like, I was sorry when I had to leave the South because I left my azaleas and my hydrangeas that were everywhere and different flowering trees that I loved, and that I was sad to see go by the wayside. But then there's the prairie flowers now that have kind of caught me. So I like to do mostly native landscaping, if you will. Something that I know will take and prosper here. I learned dogwoods don't do so well in Illinois. Azaleas don't do so well either.
How about mums?
Mums do really well. Really, really well.
If you work at it, I understand.
Yeah, if you work at it. Yeah, there have been times where we've skated between rows on a little scooter that you use for automobiles, or my kid's skateboard. One year, I was sitting on the skateboard, scooting between rows, pinching mums as we went. No pictures were taken.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
No, I think we've about covered everything.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Sure,
It's been a
thank
real
you.
pleasure.
Thank you.